you don't need to do the mics will get done by the broadcasters.
An order. Martin Wrigley to move the motion.
Thank you very much. I beg to move that this House has considered railway services in the South West. Thank you, Dr. Alan Khan. It's a pleasure to serve under your chairship. The South West is hugely reliant on the mainline railway. It's an economic lifeline. As the MP for Newton Abbot, which includes Dawlish and Teignmouth and Kingstainton, all towns with strong railway heritage, the railway is a fundamental part of my life and my community. Devon and Cornwall are notoriously underserved by transport. There is one motorway and just 2 national roads. The road network in Devon is largely minor roads that are full of potholes. The mainline railway is the key economic lifeline to the entire region. Exeter to Paddington in a couple of hours makes a huge difference and enables many to work part in London and part in Devon, including myself, even before I was an MP. The value of the railway to the economy was demonstrated during the 2014 Dawlish storm incident. From a Transport Select Committee record, we know the storms on the 4th and 14th of February 2014 caused a 100-metre breach in the seawall at Dawlish and a 25,000-tonne landslip between Dawlish and Teignmouth, which was exacerbated by a further landslip on the 5th of March. This closed the line for 8 weeks. The immediate repair cost of some 35 million, including 300 engineers, the much-lauded Orange Army, got the line running again, but the interruption cost the local economy an estimated £1.2 billion. The Plymouth economy alone is estimated at losing some £600,000 each day the line was shut. Since 2014, a lot has changed, but the dependence on the railway has, if anything, increased. Please don't think of tourism as the only industry in Devon. Remote working has blossomed, and it's very clear from the Office of Road and Rail Statistics that the overwhelming majority of rail journeys from Exeter and the other main stations is to and from London. But why do we need a debate on the topic? Well, Madam Chair, the answer is that the vital railway link is again under threat from a number of different sources. After the 2014 storm, the then Prime Minister promised that money was no object and that the line would be made resilient. A 5-phase plan was drawn up and work began. The new seawall was built and Dawlish railway station had rebuilt sea defence as well. The first 4 phases have been done and are now in place. One massive benefit was the new bridge at Dawlish. This made both platforms accessible without steps, something that we still need in too many other stations, including Teignmouth.
Will my honourable friend give way?
I will.
I thank my honourable friend for giving way. On that point, many railway stations across the South West remain inaccessible for all disabled people. Unable to get support across constituencies and mine in Yeovil have had serious accidents at railway stations. Will my honourable friend join me in urging the government to improve Access for All programme, as well as holding operations like Great Western Railway to account when proper support is not in place for disabled railway passengers?
I thank my honourable friend, and he makes a very good point. Accessible, step-free stations are vitally important all across Devon. Absolutely.
First of all, can I commend the honourable gentleman for doing this? He's right to highlight the contact between the South West and London in particular. It's disappointing that even in London, when it comes to disabled access, almost 2/3 of the tube stations and the other train stations have no access for disabled people. And if we're going to make improvements, when I say we, mean if government's going to make an improvement to railway movement for passengers and for others, then accessibility for disabled people and access to work for them has to be key to that moving forward.
I thank the honourable member for his intervention. It's absolutely right. However, when I met with Network Rail in the autumn, they said that the design team for the 5th and final phase of the work would be reassigned if funding was not seen to be forthcoming soon. This would put the project back and cost significant extra funds to get it back up to speed. A few months ago, I asked the Transport Secretary, the then Transport Secretary, about the funding for the critical final phase of the Dawlish Rail Resilience Programme. This final phase is the largest piece of work, and it deals with the landslips that caused the line to be closed long beyond the short time it took to repair the seawall breach. She looked shocked that funding wasn't already there, and whilst not promising the funds, indicated that it would be a high priority. Madam Chair, the line has been closed on a number of occasions over the past years, the previous largest cliff collapse having been in the winter 2000-2001, according to the West of Exeter Route Resilience Study. I ask the Minister to reassure Network Rail and my constituents that this vital project will not quietly be forgotten, but will be completed to protect the economic well-being of the South West and my constituents' access to rail services. However, there are other threats too. The Great Western Main Line not only runs from Paddington to Exeter, Plymouth and Penzance and the far west of Cornwall, but also covers Swindon, Bristol, Cheltenham, Gloucester, to name but a few, not forgetting Cardiff, Swansea and South Wales.
On that point, will the honourable gentleman give way?
Of course.
I'd like to thank him for giving way and for securing this debate. Does he agree with me? He'll be well aware that the South West and Wales are connected by the Severn Tunnel, which is often closed, like the closures in his region. And does he agree with me that this is impacting economic growth in South Wales? And it's all the more reason for Wales to receive the consequentials from HS2 funding that we can invest in our own railways in Wales, including the Heart of Wales line in my constituency.
I thank my honourable friend for that valuable point, and he's absolutely right. Wales has also been seen off in terms of funding. By all means.
Grateful to for giving way, and I sympathise with honourable members speaking on behalf of Wales. I just want to point out on behalf of Wiltshire, I represent commuters using the Bedwyn station, that in 2022 we lost 3 of our intercity express trains in order to support the Cardiff to Penzance line. So the commuters going through using Bedwyn no longer have the same, particularly off-peak service into London that we had before. Does he agree with me that as the government looks to commission a new fleet of intercity trains for Great Western, that it would be good to see the rightful return of a proper off-peak service that supports commuters in Wiltshire?
Martin Wrigley.
Thank you, Dr. Alan Khan. I thank the honourable gentleman for his intervention, and absolutely right. We do need more services on all of these lines to support our constituents. However, all of this will be interrupted by the creation of the HS2 link to Old Oak Common. High-speed rail is a welcome improvement to our nation's infrastructure. However, the implementation of this project has been handled poorly in the past. Whilst ignoring the largest benefit of connection between the Northern Powerhouse, whilst ignoring the largest benefit of the connections between the Northern Powerhouse altogether, the focus on delivering faster rail between London and Birmingham has delivered unwanted side effects. The decision to terminate the HS2 services at Old Oak Common, 3 miles west of Paddington, was quickly overturned as the incoming government announced the resumption of the project to tunnel to Euston. This is to be welcomed. However, the 14-platform station at Old Oak Common, 8 platforms on the surface and 6 for HS2 underground, will impact South West Rail services as it is constructed for another 6 or 7 years. Of course.
My constituents in Freeman East Somerset are still shocked to learn about the implications of Old Oak Common. Would my honourable friend agree that the consultation on this huge change and huge impact on the South West was insufficient, and that we still need to have some kind of impact survey or study into the potential impacts on tourism, business and the other effects on the South West of these works at Old Oak Common?
Martin Wrigley.
I thank my honourable friend for that intervention, and I agree entirely. The impact is immense of Old Oak Common, and it is more than just during the construction phase. The 6 or 7 years of delays and cancellations at weekends and the Christmases have been covered in this chamber before, so I won't repeat the list of weeks and weeks of diversions to Euston and significantly reduced services. I have, though, already started to receive complaints from my constituents of the inability of Euston Station to cope with the volume of passengers when the trains cannot complete their journeys to Paddington. But the piece of the plan that adds insult to injury for the millions of passengers from the South West is the idea that every GWR train will stop at Old Oak Common even after the construction is completed. It has been somewhat unclear, and some misleading averages have been quoted, but meeting with GWR and Network Rail, I understand that stopping at Old Oak Common will add some 5 to 15 minutes to every single journey. Adding 15 minutes onto the fast train of around 2 hours from Exeter to London is significant, and even more so on the quicker trains from Cheltenham or Bristol, for example. Travel to Birmingham is already available via Bristol. Looking at journey times, it will usually be faster to go to Birmingham via Bristol unless you are further east than Swindon or Westbury. Stopping at Old Oak Common will bring little or no benefit whatsoever to the majority of the long-distance rail users of the West and South West and Wales. I asked the Minister to confirm that the fast trains from the South West should be able to go through Old Oak Common without stopping.
Will my honourable friend,
Most certainly.
I'm very grateful to my honourable friend for making an excellent case. And as the Member of Parliament for Penzance, West Cornwall and the Isles of Scilly, if there are problems on the link at Dawlish, then you can multiply the impact of those disruptions for people in the far west of Cornwall. And does he not share my concern that this multi-billion-pound project for HS2 seems, as far as people in Penzance and West Cornwall, and no doubt in his constituency as well, are concerned, to experience all of the pain but none of the gain of this? Because if it's 2 hours to Exeter, it's another 3 hours down to Penzance, and it needs to be considered that we want to avoid the unnecessary disruption to people's lives for the next 7 years.
Martin Wrigley.
My honourable friend makes another very good point. It is even harder for those down in the far Cornwall than it is from Devon. Beyond both of these significant impacts are examples of the historic lack of investment in the South West railways. In the South West, we can often feel like second-class travellers, watching our services get worse so that other services can be made better. Local rail services in Devon are few and far between. Rather than a few minutes between services, as we enjoy here in London, we are lucky if we have 1 or 2 an hour. Trains are often made up of fewer carriages than plans due to faults or breakdowns. School children travelling locally between towns have been unable to get onto services because they are too full, having only half the expected number of carriages. I had one constituent telling me how her young daughter had been left in tears, having been denied access to the train with her group, triggering an anxiety attack. On the London services, mobile phone coverage is barely usable for much of the journey. While for some that may be a blessed relief, it means that Wi-Fi connections are not reliable. A huge issue in a world where so many people rely on good, reliable connections to usefully work on the train. And I consider myself fortunate going to Devon. To continue the journey in Cornwall, the train speed slows down considerably, as my right honourable friend just mentioned. Journey times could be significantly reduced by even partial electrification, which would help hybrid trains on the line speed up faster and climb some of the hills quicker. I'm sure my Cornish colleagues might elaborate. So, Madam Chair, my final ask of the Minister is to consider what might be done to show to my constituents and to the population of the wider South West they haven't been ignored. I'm asking to have some benefits come from new investment and not just delays to accommodate faster access for others to the Midlands and the North. Specifically asking for more train carriages for more local services, full metro services with no greater than half an hour between scheduled trains, monitoring and accelerating the rollout of the Access for All programme, reliable Wi-Fi across the entire route, electrification to improve journey times to Cornwall, fast trains from Wales, the West, the South West, not stopping at Old Oak Common, and commitment to complete the Dawlish Rail Resilience Programme. Thank you.
The question is that this House has considered railway services in the South West. Rachel Gilmore.
Thank you, Madam Chairman, for calling me to speak in this important debate. And it is certainly a pleasure to serve under your chairmanship. I would first obviously like to congratulate my honourable friend, the member for Newton Abbot, in securing this important debate. We all know the importance of strong and effective railway services in the South West. Just to give you a bit of constituency background, as I mentioned in my maiden speech in the House and continue to mention at every opportunity, improving the transport links in my constituency in Tiverton and Minehead is one of my top priorities. We are served by only one major train station, Tiverton Parkway, which sits on the Great Western Railway and cross-country lines, as well as the charming and historic West Somerset Railway, a heritage line, which runs up through the shoulder of my constituency and along the coast, terminating at Minehead. These services provide the totality of rail connections in my constituency, and there is still not even a way to go from Tiverton to Minehead. Minehead desperately needs linking to the main line at Taunton, something that I'm sure my honourable friend, the member for Taunton and Wellington, would agree with. But there are much wider issues at play in terms of rail travel in Tiverton and Minehead. The latest available data from July to September 24 lays bare the inadequacy of railway services across the South West. The performance of cross-country trains in terms of punctuality is pitiful. More often tardy than not, just 46.4% of the time did the service run as scheduled. This is shocking to me, as the figure is over 20 percentage points below the national average for punctuality on the rail network over the same period. Meanwhile, the Great Western Railway Service is understood to have operated in accordance with the timetable 60.2% of the time, still over 7 percentage points lower than the national figure. Better, but hardly an advert for timeliness. Not knowing whether your scheduled service will appear on time is far from the only issue for my constituents. Even when the service is scheduled and appears to be all functioning, there is always the risk of cancellation. Both of the major carriers for Tiverton and Minehead have cancellation rates above the national average for July to September 24, and in both of their cases, a majority of those cancelled trains are caused not by Network Rail, but by the operator themselves. This is not what the people of Tiverton and Minehead expect when they buy their tickets, and they deserve better. As is also the case across the length and breadth of the country, passengers in the South West are forced to grapple with exorbitant train fares. Even with the government's rail fare discounts in place for the next few months, we know that the price of standard regulated tickets in England will be going up by 4.6% on March the 2nd, climbing higher than the RPI inflation and hitting passengers hard. The Liberal Democrats have previously called on the government to do the decent thing and to freeze rail fares immediately to help families struggling under the cost of living crisis instead of hiking ticket prices. And we will continue to fight for a fair deal for commuters and families who will be left forking out more and more for the privilege of using Britain's rail systems. I'm not sure how many people in the South West would call it a privilege. Just 1% of my constituents use rail as their means of travelling to work, according to the data from the House of Commons Library. This is well below the national average, but not at all surprising, given the sorry picture for rail travellers in the constituency that I've just painted. Honourable members might assume that the proportion of my constituents travelling to work by bus would be higher. I'm afraid to report that this percentage sits at just 2%. Members might also know that I'm an avid campaigner for improving the bus routes in Tiverton and Minehead. However, we are talking about railways today. The state of affairs of railway services in not just Tiverton and Minehead, but the whole of the South West results in added strain on the road network, down to the fact that the lack of transport connectivity and unreliable, overcrowded and overcharged public transport links have left people with no other choice but to travel by car. The environmental implications of this reality cannot be ignored. And briefly to Old Oak Common. Before coming to a close, I must also draw attention to the looming Old Oak Common HS2 project and the inevitable disruption to travel that this will cause. Pressing ahead with this project will condemn the South West to operating amongst the slowest intercity services anywhere in the country and greatly reduce the number of trains direct to London. To accommodate Old Oak Commons' new role, trains originating from the south-west will be diverted from the traditional London Paddington route to London Euston. This move will result in an additional hour to train journeys on average. With the current level of provision of rail services already well below that which could be deemed satisfactory, the new interchange at Old Oak Common comes at great expense to the West Country and to our friends in South Wales. Freezing fares immediately and introducing discounts for passengers in the South West seems a reasonable and indeed fair first step to correcting this glaring disservice to the people of Tiverton and Minehead and beyond. Outside of the short term, we ought to be looking to simplify the fragmented ticketing system to provide passengers with some more affordable fares if we are seriously making public transport public. This government has an opportunity to look seriously on the issues of the South West and its rail network, and I sincerely hope that they do so. For far too long, transport links have been overlooked and under-resourced. I appreciate the pressures of the public purse are heavy at the moment, but so too are the pressures on ordinary people in Tiverton and Minehead and across the South West. And so I urge the government to look closely at what they can do to better support the rail, bus and road network so that the people of the South West don't have to settle for the sort of service currently on offer far, far too often. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Noah Law.
Thank you, Dr Alan Khan, for your chairmanship today, and I thank the Honourable Gentleman for Newton Abbot for securing this debate. The need to improve rail services across the South West, particularly in Cornwall, which is at the sharp end of our problems, cannot be overstated. Connectivity is the backbone of our economy and our communities. Yet our transport infrastructure still lags far behind what is needed to unleash its full potential. This summer, the Mid-Cornwall Metro will launch in my constituency, offering improved rail links between Newquay and the other parts of Cornwall. And whilst this is a very welcome development and goes some way to undo the damage done by the then Prime Minister in 1987, inflicted on the line, despite its lofty name, the Mid-Cornwall Metro, for people outside of Newquay, will fall somewhat short of being the transformational project that the Duchy needs. So this brings me to the wider issue of transport in my constituency. The road between our two major towns, St Austell and Newquay, is winding and unsafe, and given the absence of a direct train linking these, despite a track running relatively directly from St Austell through Burngallow up to St Denis, falling just short of rejoining the main Newquay line at Gosmore by just a mile or so, this kind of large scale of capital investment in a transformative project such as this is desperately needed. We have a stunning stretch of Line 2 running down from my hometown into Foy, another town served by treacherous roads that's long shipped our white gold China clay to the world. I'd urge the Minister to explore the feasibility of these kinds of projects in Cornwall and particularly on those magnificent branch lines which have been ravaged over the years, to provide clarity on our clean transport plans and make public transport in Cornwall a no-brainer rather than a chore, ensuring that our communities have the infrastructure they need to thrive. If we are to build more homes, people in Cornwall must see that the services and infrastructure commensurate with that is put in place. In the West, we need a fair deal for the Scillies, well represented by my honourable friend for St Ives. We need improved rail links down to our fine harbour and contender for a floating offshore wind hub in Falmouth. And in the east, we also face significant challenges with the Tamar Bridge and Tall Point ferry services, which are vital lifelines for local residents. So we need a deal that prioritises their needs and alleviates the financial burden on commuters and families. And as a final point, I must stress the need for dramatically improved train and internet connectivity. In today's connected world, reliable onboard connectivity is a necessity, not just a luxury. And while some rail services in the UK benefit from high speed, from electrification and dependable internet access, this is far from universal, and passengers across the South West are too often excluded from these advances. Equal access to modern amenities like these are essential to ensuring that rail travel is both productive and comfortable in everyone. It would be a small grace in mitigating some of the chaos caused by Old Oak Common and HS2, a supposed England and Wales project, a supposed England and Cornwall project, but I'll believe it when I see it, Madam Chair. As the Honourable Gentleman for Newton Abbot has already pointed out, the South West, including Cornwall, deserves a transport strategy that addresses our real needs and delivers transformative change. I look forward to hearing how the Minister intends to prioritise our region, close the gap in infrastructure investment and provide Cornwall and the wider South West with the tools we need to thrive in the years ahead.
Carla Denyer.
Thank you, Dr Alan Carn. It's a pleasure to serve under your chairship. And thank you to the member for Newton Abbot for opening this debate. I'm grateful to be able to speak in this debate representing my many constituents who rely on these services every day and, of course, as somebody who myself spends a lot of time, often more time than intended, on trains. My Bristol Central constituents often contact me, unfortunately, about their poor experiences with trains in and around Bristol. Complaints over services, particularly between Bristol and London, are frequent, as this journey often entails extortionate, prohibitive costs with disappointing services, with cancellations and delays featuring all too often. This unreliability is incredibly frustrating for many of my constituents, but particularly for disabled constituents and those with long-term health conditions, who raise with me that they often go to huge lengths to carefully plan their journeys, only to have their plans upturned at the last minute. I'd also like to reinforce the point made by several members on the importance of disabled accessible train stations, and in particular ask the Minister if he has any update on making Lawrence Hill Station in Bristol, which is just outside my constituency but used by many of my constituents, disabled accessible after my predecessor, Thangham Debonair, I know, campaigned on this issue for many years. This accessibility and unreliability issues affect so many of my constituents who are left unable to make their trips or forced to choose transport that is more expensive and often much more damaging to the environment, as the member for Tiverton and Minehead pointed out. Train journeys only produce around 32% of the emissions of a car journey per person. So, to avoid unnecessary emissions, we need to make the greenest option the easiest option, and this requires, above all, reliability. So I'm very pleased to see the railways coming back into public ownership. The Green Party has been a long-standing advocate for renationalisation, and I'm looking forward to seeing the implementation of this essential transition. On this point, I wonder if the Minister can give any further indications of when Great Western Railway will come back into public ownership, because I understand that the core term expiry date is in June of this year, but the full expiry date is not until June of 2028, leaving some uncertainty over when exactly the government will end the contract. So I'd be grateful if the Minister is able to give any clarification to my constituents on this. Hopefully, the answer is sooner rather than later, but if my constituents are facing a wait of 3+ years, then can the Minister tell us what steps he plans to make the train services in the South West more reliable and affordable in the meantime? Finally, many of my constituents have also been in contact about the reopening of the Portishead branch line, which, again, although not quite in my constituency, is used by many of my constituents. So I'd be grateful if the Minister could provide an update on that too. I'll end my remarks there, Madam Chair, but I'd be grateful to the Minister for a response to the questions I've raised, to provide some clarity for my constituents on the steps being taken to provide them with a modern, affordable, reliable rail service. Thank you.
Adam Kohler. Sorry, Adam Dance. Sorry, Adam Dance. Okay, thank you. All right, I now call Liberal Democrat spokesperson Paul Kohler.
Thank you, Dr Alan Carn, and it's a pleasure to serve under your chairmanship. Can I first thank my honourable friend from Newton Abbot for his work securing this debate, for the Backbench Business Committee for granting the debate, and for members from across the House for agreeing to speak. As we've heard from everyone here today, it is clear the railway network in the South West needs urgent improvement. The failure of successive Conservative governments has left the network in a terrible state. Ticket prices are too high, services too unreliable, infrastructure too old and the capacity too meagre. This is true across the country, but nowhere more so than the South West. As we heard from members across the House, businesses and individuals are highly reliant on the railways, and Labour needs to take urgent action. The government is hoping to meet its targets on economic growth and housing. Ensuring this key region has a fully functioning rail system is absolutely vital. This requires action. The government must ensure the challenges the railways in the South West face are met. We've heard about a number of these challenges today. As my humble friend for Newton Abbot and Tiverton and Moorhead eloquently explained, for those in the further reaches of our isles, their rail services are uniquely vulnerable. As we saw, when the seawall falls at Dawlish, it can have catastrophic consequences for those further down the line, cutting them off from the rest of the country. We heard the figures earlier. We cannot afford for this to happen again. It's currently vital that the new government back the fifth stage of the project to ensure the line is protected from further disruption. Members today have again raised a number of concerns about the building works at Old Oak Common. As has been said, there will be 6 years of disruption. As the member for St Ives said, residents and constituents in the South West will get all the pain but none of the gain. Anyone living west of Swindon and Westbury will simply get no real benefit from these connections, and we need to compensate them by doing other things for the rail system and other transport within the South West. We've also had doubts about the current capacity of Euston and the overcrowding there during the building works. And we have this other issue about the train stopping at Old Oak Common, the 5 to 15 minute delay. It sounds like a small thing, but it's important when we're talking about a fast train. Now, previously, your ministerial colleague said no decision had been made at whether or not trains would stop, or every train would stop at Old Oak Common. Can we have an update on that, please? My party and I are highly supportive of the HS2 project. There are understandable concerns. We appreciate that Old Oak Common is a vital part of HS2 and will bring benefits to many. We must also accept, though, that the benefits of Old Oak Common and HS2 will be less keenly felt by those in the South West, and we will keep reiterating that, and we need to do something for them. The constituents of the South West and those represented today must receive reassurances that the government is listening. They're not being ignored. Their voice must be heard, and I hope their patience will be rewarded by finally receiving the oft-promised investment in the region it so desperately needs and deserves. We heard some of that from my colleagues today, from my party and other parties. The Access for All programme, which appeared to die under the Tories. We need access for all, not just in the South West, of course, across all regions, particularly in London, as my colleague said. The Severn Tunnel closure is causing real problems for transport into the west, so into Wales. And as I asked the question of the Secretary of State last Thursday in Transport Questions, is Wales going to get more investment to compensate for the money going to HS2? HS2 is regarded as an England and Wales project. It's giving no great benefit to Wales. Wales needs some money in the same way that Scotland did. It needs investment in the Welsh rail system. We need proper services for Wiltshire. We need to address the fact there's short trains. More train carriages need to be introduced. Problems with mobile phone access, we hear time and time again. We have to bring the rail system into the 21st century. The need to electrify sections of the line to speed up the trains is also important. And punctuality is a real issue. Not to mention the fact the cost of rail travel to the South West is exorbitant. Yeah, of course.
I thank my honourable friend for... Thank you, Madam Chair. I thank my honourable friend for giving way. He raised some very important points. I wonder if he also agrees with me that the decision to renationalise South Western Rail a year before the government has set up GB Rail will inevitably mean that the investment in the kind of upgrades he's talking about will stagnate completely.
I think there's a real
Paul Kohler.
Sorry, I think there's a real issue here. I thank my colleague for the intervention. GB Rail exists as an idea, but we don't know what it's doing yet. We have real problems. The idea that nationalising rail will suddenly solve the problem is too simplistic. We're agnostic about ownership. We need actually to invest in our rail system. And on that point, my party has been supportive of open access. That's why we supported the Go-Op cooperative and their ideas to bring rail system to the southwest. We are worried that the Secretary of State recently said in a letter last week that she seems to be going cold on open access. So we'd like more clarity on that, because we are supportive of the Go-Op cooperative idea, and we want to see ideas like that work. In fact, open access is the only bit of the rail system that's working quite well at the moment. Hull Trains, for example, has far better customer satisfaction than any other part of the rail system. The idea that we are backing out of open access now worries us, and Go-Op was a perfect idea to help a particular section in the southwest. So thank you again to my colleague for calling this debate. We'd love some answers from the Minister.
Opposition spokesperson Rebecca Smith.
Thank you, Madam Chair. It's a pleasure to serve under you, Dr. Alan Khan. I'd also like to congratulate the Honourable Member for Newton Abbot, Martin Wrigley, on securing this debate, and I would like to thank all members who have contributed so far. And we're very familiar with this debate. I've taken part in many myself. Just to draw a couple of comments. The Honourable Member for Tiverton and Minehead, who has alerted us to the West Somerset Railway, which again is an illustration of how oftentimes the South West is a holiday destination rather than somewhere that people see as a need for economic drivers of the railway line. And having been on the West Somerset Railway, I'm particularly fond of it, but it's not good enough that that's all she has access to in addition to Tiverton train station. The Honourable Member for St Austell and Newquay has highlighted the opening of the Mid-Cornwall Metro soon, which I would like to just acknowledge is came from the previous government's levelling up funding and has been delivered by Conservative-led Cornwall Council, but is clearly an illustration of how those smaller metros can be delivered, and it would be great to see more of those across the country. My honourable friend, the member for East Wiltshire, raised challenges around Bedwin Station in his constituency, and we've also had contributions from the member from St Ives, from Yeovil and Bristol Central, as well as the member from Wimbledon. So really good to hear perspectives from all across your constituencies. I do think it's important just to recognise at the beginning of what I'm going to say the dedicated workforce that we have across the railway industry. And obviously in the last few months there's been a huge amount of noise about railway, particularly around increases in salaries, etc. And I don't know about you, but I've certainly had at least one constituent who's highlighted to me the fact that if we're not careful, we do demonise those valuable workers that we do need in our train system. So I just want to acknowledge on record the fact that actually the whole train system is vital to our country, and we do acknowledge that, but we still have to have this debate anyway because it is representing other voices across our constituencies. We've had 3 debates on the railways in recent months, or at least I've taken part in 3. Not only my maiden speech, where I'd be remiss of me, having spoken to the Minister earlier, not to mention the locomotion, which, if you're interested, was in my maiden speech and is part of the passenger railway bill debate. But we've also, in the last 2 months, had debates on both the railway in Devon and Old Oak Commons. So I think it should be really clear to the Minister and his team that this is something that the South West is particularly passionate about. And I have to admit that I've got 2 hats on. Not only am I representing the official opposition today, but I am a member from Devon as well. So I feel very deeply a lot of what has been said this morning. But we must also acknowledge the meetings that ministers have had and have been very open-handed in as well. So I know this is something that there is open conversations on, but there is still some way to go, as I think it has been clear today. The Honourable Member for Newton Abbot summarised some of those key challenges particularly well in his debate, and he spoke very strongly about the 5th phase of Dawlish and how we need to see the funding for that, because ultimately it is a waste of money otherwise. We've done everything that has been achieved before without completing that work. Old Oak Common needs no further explanation. I think that has been covered widely. The challenge of Wi-Fi accessibility, and also I think that wider context of roads and buses in the South West as well. Let's not forget, though, that between 2010 and 2024, the Conservatives increased investment by £100 billion. So it's not fair to say that nothing has happened. And I think the railway system is something that we've all been working on over the last few decades. Included in that was £165 million on the South West Rail Resilience Programme, which has already been mentioned. And it was a bold decision to reallocate HS2 Phase 2 funds towards the restoring our railways, which we would have seen some real benefits for in the South West. Now, they've been cancelled because the new government has said that there is no funding for it. But I note that they have managed to reinstate Phase 2 between Crewe and Manchester, which I'm assuming is using the money that would ultimately have been used for projects such as the Tavy Rail between Tavistock and Plymouth. So I'd be interested in the Minister to comment on that, and how can they say that the Restoring Your Railways was unfunded if they have been able to put the Crewe to Manchester line back into play? We've also seen the Passenger Railway Services Bill come through, which has been mentioned this morning, but I won't speak too far on that, other than we believe it is an ideological piece of legislation, and we were disappointed that the government rejected our reasoned amendment at the time to ensure that at least when terminating existing franchise agreements, the government would consider operating performance. Instead, we've had inflation-busting pay rises without securing productivity agreements. And most recently, the 12th of December, the latest figures for July to September from the Office of Rail and Road show that since those increased salaries, we've seen a decrease in performance, decreased punctuality, increased cancellations and decreased public performance measures, which, I don't want to cast aspersions, but they do seem to be slightly linked. However, as I draw to a close in my comment, I want to just lay out some questions for the Minister, if I may, some of which have been touched on before, but this is a perfect opportunity to reiterate them. So on the 11th of November in the Chamber, I was able to raise the issue of the lack of Sundays in the Great Western Railway contracts, which has a massive impact on rail services right across the South West. It was raised again in the debate here in December, and in November the then Secretary of State said that she would return to the House with an update. So I'd be interested if there's any progress in those negotiations. Is the Minister convinced that the spending decisions for the £30 million Old Oak Common mitigations, which again have been mentioned today, are best for passengers in the South West? Because I think the argument that many honourable members have made today is that actually, whilst it may need to happen, that £30 million may need to be paid to make Old Oak Common happen, I don't believe that the residents who live across the South West are necessarily seeing the benefits. Can the Minister commit that not all South West services will have to stop at Old Oak Common? Again, just reiterating the points that have been made already. Will the Minister also confirm that the HS2 Phase 2 Crewe to Manchester is fully funded? That piece of that announcement that was made earlier on in this Parliament. And finally, if I may, and if the room will humour me, just one question about my constituency that remains unanswered. Cross country do not stop at Ivy Bridge train station in my constituency, which is fully ready to go as a park and ride. Currently, only Great Western Railway are committed to that and serve it with 16 trains per day. For my constituency, which has a new growing town of Sherford plus suburbs of Plimson and Plymstock, all of whom would benefit from Ivy Bridge having up to 45 trains stopping a day, will he commit to looking further into that, and could we work together on pressurising cross-country to deliver that for my constituents? So thank you to everybody who has taken part in this debate today. I don't think the issue of railway in the South West is going anywhere fast. We are going to hear on and on, I'm sure. Ha ha, that was totally unintended. Turns out I'm naturally funny after all. But ultimately, I think you'll be hearing more from us. And I know I speak on behalf of members from across the South West to know that the government is listening, but I hope you appreciate that we're not going to go away, because this is incredibly important to the entire region, which has so much potential for the economy of the United Kingdom. Thank you.
Minister Simon Lightwood.
Thank you very much, Dr. Alan Carn, and it's a pleasure to serve with you in the chair for the very first time. And can I also welcome the member for West Dorset in her first outing on the front bench as the opposition spokesman today. I want to start by congratulating the honourable member for Newton Abbot for securing this debate on rail services to the South West, and I thank all honourable members for their contributions today. I attended a debate on the future of rail services in Devon on the 11th of December, and my honourable friend, the Minister for the Future of Roads, attended a debate on the impact of Old Oak Common on rail services on the 17th of December. The frequency of these debates demonstrates, I think, the importance that honourable members and their constituents place on the rail network and the crucial role that it plays in supporting economic development, housing, employment growth and tourism. This government recognises that too, and that is why we have made fixing Britain's railway our top transport priority. We need to improve services for passengers and deliver better value for money for the taxpayer. As I've said in a previous debate, the South West has seen a strong recovery in rail passenger numbers since the pandemic. And we know many services are now very busy indeed, particularly towards the end of the week and at weekends, including Thursdays. To reduce crowding, funding has been authorised for 12 additional cross-country trains. 3 are already in service and the rest are due to enter service in May. Local services around Devon are also experiencing some capacity issues, particularly on the Barnstable line and on school services from Paignton and Exmouth, all of which run into Exeter. Officials and GWR are working on options to increase capacity on some local and regional services, but this will of course be subject to affordability. This government continues to focus on restoring rail performance. We have been clear that rail services have been failing passengers, and the Rail Minister has now met with GWR and Cross Country, as well as Network Rail, to ensure that they're delivering on their plans to address poor performance. A resilient railway is crucial to the economy, not just in the South West, but right across the country. That is why £165 million has been invested to date in the South West Resilience Programme at Dawlish, delivering better journey reliability for rail travellers in the South West and providing greater resilience for the coastal railway during several named storms, which were alluded to earlier on, that have affected the South West in recent years. We continue to work closely with Network Rail as they develop proposals for the 5th phase of the programme between Parsons Tunnel and Tynemouth. I'm aware that honourable members have shown strong support for a number of potential rail projects, including the member for St Austell and Newquay. Across the region, across the country, ministers have been clear, however, that in the context of the financial situation the government has inherited, it will not be possible to afford to deliver all of the proposed projects. The Secretary of State is conducting a thorough review of the previous government's transport plans to ensure that our transport infrastructure portfolio drives economic growth and delivers value for the taxpayers. In terms of Old Oak Common, many members have referenced this today, and comments around the impact that it will have on rail services to and from the South West. The station will enable HS2 services to start operating by providing a new interchange with the Elizabeth line. Without it, HS2 cannot open. As I know you'll appreciate, a project of the scale and significance of Old Oak Common cannot be delivered without some disruption to existing services. Our challenge to HS2 Limited is to keep that disruption to a minimum and to support Network Rail and train operators to keep passengers moving. The most recent phase of the work took place over Christmas, and this was delivered successfully. This required a 3-day closure of Paddington Station, in addition to Christmas Day and Boxing Day. But the rail industry worked hard to prepare for this. Some long-distance Great Western services were diverted into Euston Station to maintain a direct link into a London terminus, whilst others terminated at Ealing Broadway and Reading. We expect this to provide a model for any future closures of the railway into Paddington. As has been said before, the next significant block had been due to take place in December 2026, but this has now been replanned to a later date by HS2 Limited. Further details about the timing of future works will be shared as soon as they become available in the spring. The Rail Minister and I have heard from many colleagues about the concerns of their constituents with regards to the future timetable and the potential impact on journey times. This was addressed in detail by my honourable friend, the Minister for the Future of Roads, on the 17th of December, and I would refer honourable members back to Hansard for more information. As has been noted previously, the future timetable will be under development for many years to come, and officials are working with the industry to assess the options for calling patterns at Old Oak Common. Ministers are committed to ensuring that passenger interests are considered and that disruption is minimised for passengers both during and after construction. I'd just like to close this part of my speech by confirming that the Government will continue to put passengers at the heart of what we do in delivering our railway, which in its 200th year we can be proud of once again. Just touching on some of the points raised by honourable members today, in terms, the opposition spokesman talked about Sunday GWR services. Of course, the Government recognises that performance is not where it needs to be on Great Western Rail services. This is due to a range of issues, including infrastructure and fleet reliability, as well as train crew availability, which has resulted in high levels of cancellations on Sundays in recent months. Officials and GWR are actively working to address this issue. A number of members have raised the issue of Wi-Fi connectivity. Free Wi-Fi is available, of course, on GWR services. However, I'm aware that these are particularly poor in parts of the network. Ministers have asked officials to explore the feasibility of a range of technology options to improve passenger connectivity on the rail network. The Department is also conducting research to measure the strength of mobile signals along the rail network to fully understand where interventions are needed and any potential impacts. The electrification was also raised. The most highly used part, actually, of the Great Western network has been electrified between London, Paddington and Cardiff. There are currently no plans to electrify further parts of the Great Western route. A number of members also raised accessibility. Following the election, we are carefully considering the best approach to the Access for All programme. The DfT ministers aren't yet able to comment on the next steps regarding the Access for All projects at specific stations. However, please be assured that we are committed to improving the accessibility of the railway and recognise the valuable social and economic benefits that this brings to our communities. It was mentioned earlier on around the South West Rail Resilience Programme, Dawlish. The Government recognises, of course, the importance of the rail route through Dawlish and the South West region. To date, as I mentioned earlier on, £165 million has been invested through the South West Rail Resilience Programme to deliver improved resilience across the route. And just to echo again that no decision, when it comes to services stopping at Old Oak Common, no decision has been taken about which service we will call there and when. The future timetable is under development and will be for many, many years to come. Members also raised the issue of rail fares. We're committed, of course, to the biggest overhaul of our railways in a generation and ensuring that people receive better services and have simpler ticketing. Our aim is to keep the price of rail travel at a point that is good for both passengers and the taxpayers. And we're also committed to reviewing the overly complicated fare system. Just on general performance raised by many members, in terms of GWR, I recognise that performance is not where it needs to be on Great Western Railway services. This is due to a range of issues, including infrastructure, the fleet reliability, as well as train crew availability, which I alluded to earlier on. This has resulted in higher levels of cancellations on Sundays in recent months. In terms of SWR performance on the West of England line, this has been challenging and falls way below the level of our expectations for passengers. The mostly single-line section between Salisbury and Exeter has suffered multiple failures and has very little resilience in the event of disruption. So SWR and Network Rail have dedicated a specific working group to look at minimising the impact of delay and cancellation going forward. Finally, on cross-country, as a result of poor performance, you'll be aware that cross-country is subject to a remedial agreement that runs until March 2025. The Department will monitor outputs really closely to ensure that cross-country is making sufficient progress. And with that, I'll just welcome the comments from the member for Bristol Central in terms of the renationalisation of our rail. Look, the Government is committed to ending years of poor service and fragmentation of our railways by creating a unified and simplified system through public ownership. and the establishment of Great British Railways. All currently franchised services are expected to be in public ownership within the next 3 years. And with that, I thank members once again for their contributions today.
Martin Wrigley to wind up.
Thank you, Dr. Alan Khan. I'd like to thank the Backbench Business Committee for giving me the opportunity to have this debate today, and to thank colleagues from across the House for participating. I think we've heard some fairly clear messages, and I'd like to thank the Minister for responding to some of them. And there's certainly some hope in some of the responses that have been given. I think it's very clear that over a long period of time, the South West and Wales have been disadvantaged through lack of investment in the railway, and whilst large sums have been talked about, it's clearly not been down in the South West where it has been used. I would like to thank the Minister for recognising the importance of the rail network and the news about increasing some of the capacity on local services. That is most welcome. A resilient railway is crucial, the Minister said, and that's exactly right. From Parsons Tunnel to Teignmouth, not Tynemouth, I'm afraid, it's Teignmouth. Tynemouth is somewhere else. Teignmouth, give or close. It's very confusing because it's Teignmouth and it's Teignbridge, so the pronunciation is most unique. Is absolutely vital. That is the section that closed the railway for 8 weeks. It was not the breach of the seawall that closed it for 8 weeks. It was the collapse. It happened 15 years before. It will happen again. Those cliffs are not protected. So without that fifth phase, the resilience work that has been done to date will have been wasted. I think what Network Rail need is not the funding today, but the promise of funding in the future to ensure that the design team is there and ready to go when funding is available. I think we all understand that we cannot fund everything at once. I don't think anyone's asking for that. So I understand that you say you cannot fund everything now. What I want to see is a promise that it will be funded in the future when money is available, so that we can make sure that it is progressed and not forgotten. That is absolutely vital. HS2 disruption, it's interesting to hear that the purpose of Old Oak Common is to transfer passengers from HS2 to the Elizabeth line. That is a real clear focus. So it shows that there is no real interaction intended with GWR, South West and Wales services. So the idea of stopping trains, again, I don't think at this stage we are expecting a complete timetable. I think we would just like the confirmed option that some trains will not stop. Now that has been ruled out in some of the conversations I've had before, but I like the fact that it's now open. But I think having that as a commitment without the full timetable will reassure my constituents that fast trains will still be able to go through to London. The Dawlish investment of 165 million, again, very much welcomed. I refer back to the cost of the closure of 1.2 billion. 165 million versus 1.2 billion. To me, it is an obvious investment that needs to be continued. And I would like to end by thanking Dr. Alan Khan and congratulating her on her first chairing of Westminster Hall debate, and thank everybody present. And I look forward to more conversations with the rail ministers on the future of railways in the South West, because I think we are only just beginning this journey. Thank you very much.
Thank you. The question is that this House has considered railway services in the South West. As many as are of that opinion say aye. Aye. Of the contrary, no. I think the ayes have it. Order, order. This sitting is suspended now until 11 a.m.